Steve Gove is the founder and director of the Prague Fringe Festival, which has just got underway in the Czech capital for the 15th time. The Scot's been living in the city since 1997 and is an infectiously enthusiastic guide to his Prague. Our tour begins at Malostranská Beseda, an historic venue on the main square in the Lesser Quarter that's been the hub of Prague Fringe since its extensive renovation in the 2000s.
It's a late Renaissance building, built somewhere around 1407 apparently. It's got a really interesting history. I think it was probably the town hall for the area originally. I think it was a political jail in its early days. And it's been a cultural centre for I think about 300 years. So what better a place to house our own festival? It's beautiful to look at, and one of the most amazing things about it is that actually the roof, which is a red tiled roof typical of Malostrana, actually had some beautiful features, including a tower put onto it only about 6 or 7 years ago, before it reopened after the reconstruction. They found the design of the roof from an old etching, and I'm not sure if anyone really knows whether it was like that originally or if in fact that was what they'd hoped to create. But anyway, it now looks like that, and when you're passing and you look up, you would never know that these beautiful features had literally just been put back or put there a handful of years ago. And it was brilliant passing in the tram and walking around the area when they were doing it. These beautiful huge copper domes were sitting in the car park across the street, and it was fascinating to watch as they were being holstered up onto the roof.
Otherwise, how much of the Fringe takes place in this part of the city, Malostrana?
All of it does now. We sort of started to migrate over here about 11 or 12 years ago, and after a period of about 4 or 5 years, we were entirely housed here. So although Beseda is the hub, which has the Fringe Club as well, we've got Divadlo Inspirace, which is in the music faculty across the back of the church there, in a beautiful Gothic cellar. We've got another little studio space, also very nearby. But then further down, just literally one tram stop away, or 5 minutes by foot, you've got a fabulous studio theatre called Divadlo Kampa on the edge of the Čertovka. There's Divadlo na Pradle, which is a very small proscenium arch theatre. And the final one, which is, although it's still in Malostrana, but it's right on the edge of Malostrana, is a tiny little room in the back of the Kavarna 3+1, which apparently has the best hot chocolate in Prague. Or is it tea? I can't remember now, but it's one of those two.
I can only presume that the performers at Fringe are impressed by these venues.
Mind blown. And a lot of the performers are from Scotland, England, other parts of Europe, and of course for them Prague is also a fantastic place. But when these young upcoming performers come over from Australia or the States or Canada, they are just blown away. And when you're drinking beer late into the night in the Fringe Club on the first floor, and you look across and see the beautiful St. Nicholas Church, I'm sure as a young American who has just travelled to Europe for the first time, you would not believe what you were looking at. It is stunningly. It catches my breath still, and I've lived here for almost 20 years.
Otherwise, how has the perception of Fringe changed among Czechs? I presume before you started, they were unfamiliar even with the idea of a fringe.
Well, actually not at all. I had to keep repeating myself. No, not French, fringe. And no, not fridge, fringe. It took a really long time. Creating a fringe in Prague and calling the event a fringe was its biggest success and also its biggest trouble in the early days, because the world over everyone knew exactly what we were trying to do, but it took a little bit longer here. But really soon after establishing the Fringe, there were a number of really interesting articles each August written about Edinburgh Fringe. And of course, as the years went on, Czech groups were visiting Edinburgh more regularly and stuff. So certainly in terms of the arts community, the word fringe is not a foreign word to anyone anymore. But we're still trying to reach out to wider audiences. But I would definitely say that by comparison to the early days, it slips off the tongue much more easily.
From Malostranská Beseda, Steve Gove and I hop on a tram and head across the river, specifically to the area behind the National Theatre. It's where you'll find the bistro-style restaurant Universal. My guide's been coming here regularly for almost as long as he's been in Prague, and he swears by its steaks.
Usually when family and friends visit, we come here. So looking around at the tables around me, I can visualise all my family and friends that have visited over the years, where we've sat, the conversations we've had, and the wonderful red wine that we've drunk. So it's a very, very special place to me. If I could choose where I would have my last meal on earth, this would be it. Absolutely, without any question of a doubt.
I also remember what this place was like when it opened, and my impression is that it hasn't changed at all. Is anything different from what was here in 96, 97?
Well, they've got quite a quirky selection of things hanging on the wall. Right above my head there's a sort of faux elephant head. Across the way there's various pictures from a number of films that look like they're from the 70s. I think that might be Jane Fonda over there, I'm not sure. But it hasn't changed much at all, no. Certainly the tables and chairs are exactly the same.
But it's still able to compete with all these new hipster places that seem to be opening in Prague every other week.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, when this first opened and when we first started coming here, you'd have to book sometimes 2 or 3 days in advance to get a seat. It was chock-a-block. And then it went through a really quiet period for a number of years after where, you know, we'd call up, no, yeah, just come along, and the place would be half empty. But it's picked up again. I'm not sure why that would have been, but I think just the fact that it has been around for so long and that everyone knows it, and it's kind of like an old faithful, you know, it does what it says it does, and it does it very well. And I believe that the chef who's been cooking all these fantastic steaks over the years is the same Ukrainian woman who was working here way back when it opened. So the food you order today is exactly as the food you ordered last week or a year ago or 6 years ago. The quality is brilliant, the staff are friendly, and the price is right too, not too expensive.
Otherwise, what cafes, bars or restaurants do you like in Prague?
I tend to do a lot of the cafes actually now. There's such a brilliant cafe culture in Prague, which also didn't exist when I first moved here. Original Coffee on Betlemské náměstí, is it? Or just around the corner from Betlemské náměstí is fantastic. They do great AeroPress, and of course you can buy beans to go as well, which you can grind at your leisure the following day. That's one of my favourites downtown. There's so many now. Almost every area of Prague has 3 or 4 of these fantastic coffee places, and you can get absolutely high on the best roasted coffee. Whenever I go to the cinema, I usually go to the art house cinemas like Oko, Světozor, and the newly reopened Kino Pilotu up in Vyshovice. It's great to hang out in the bars there afterwards. I kind of tend to prefer that now than actually going to pubs. Although I do like Vinohradský pivovar. The beer is great, the food is great, and it's totally smoke-free, which is a big surprise here in Prague still.
The final destination on our tour of Steve Gove's Prague is Vyšehrad, the historical fort believed to date from the 10th century that juts out over the Vltava. The Scotsman lived just beneath Vyšehrad on the street Lumirova for several years, and recalls fondly his introduction to a spot he describes as magical.
I got the tram up, I got off a stop early and started wandering through this path, which seems to be the street, but it was like a tree-lined, or like a path that went through beautiful little wooded area near this ancient fortified wall. And I came out of this little wooded area and saw the address, which ended up being where I stayed for the next 6 years. And just across the street from the door, there's a path which leads into a tunnel through the fortified wall and then up some steps. It's like a secret entrance into this magical fortified area, which is a park. Beautiful, very peaceful place. Equally as nice at night as it is during the day. In the middle of winter when it's freezing, in the height of summer when it's boiling hot. It's a beautiful place to be.
When you lived on Lumirova, how often would you come up to the park here at Vyšehrad?
Pretty much daily. I used to tell people it was, I actually used to believe that Vyšehrad was my back garden, because it was literally out of the door and across the street and I was there. And at the weekends, I used to come up through the tunnel, right across the whole stretch of Vyšehrad and down the far side, and then walk along the river, which was lovely. Being from the northeast of Scotland, it's not hard to imagine that I miss the ocean, and that was, for a long time, that was kind of my substitute ocean, walking along the Vltava, along the waterfront, and just beautiful to approach it from Vyšehrad. And it's always full of birds and dogs, as you can hear. It's such a special place, as I say, any time of the year.
I know there's a beer garden up here. Did you go there? And is there anything else up here for people to do?
Yeah, actually the beer garden, for a good number of years, became the night after the Fringe hangout zone. And we used to set aside a time where everyone would gather up here, and they'd cook sausages and vegetables on the grill, which were to die for. There'd always be about 200 dogs running around picking up the scraps as well, but brilliant beer and a great place with a fantastic view. There's no reason, no specific thing that you would need to come here for other than just to be here. The church is beautiful, of course, and you should always try and make the opportunity of going in there if it's open, and definitely the cemetery.
I find the cemetery is a great place to take people who've been to Prague maybe a few times and feel like they've seen everything, and then you show them this incredible cemetery.
Absolutely, and just to be able to walk past the graves of Dvorak, Smetana, Mucha, Destinova, and the list continues. It's a magical experience. And at night, in the winter months, when it's still open but it's dark, and people come up and light candles on the graves, it's just beautiful and eerie all at the same time. And then during the day, in the afternoon, you'll hear the fantastic bells from the church tower ringing out the sound of Smetana's Vltava, which is also a magical thing.